Good afternoon and welcome everybody. I'm glad you could all make it here today for what is undoubtedly an incredibly important panel discussion, where we are going to try and answer, can service design save the day? Now, my name is Chris and I'm the content manager and creative lead here at mobileLIVE. And for the next hour, I'm also going to be your moderator. Now, most of you would require an introduction to me. However, I've got no doubt that you're very familiar with the enemy in this story. After all, it's quite fond of the virtual world that we're meeting in right now. We're talking about bad digital experiences, and this adversary is cunning, takes many forms, and doesn't discriminate on whose lives it impacts. This is why, in order to stand a chance against such a villain, we couldn't assemble your average panel of service designers. No, we needed heroes. We needed men and women whose expertise, perspectives, and proficiency could transcend industry, could meet and defeat the enemy head on, no matter where in the digital ecosystem it decided to strike, making the lives and digital interactions of people around the globe better. So that's what we did. And while I have no doubt our guests will live up to this very, very modest segue, I think it's about time we introduce the people you are really here to see. First up, and I think her cape must be in the wash, is the Titan from Telus, the service design dynamite, and officially the Director of Service Design and Strategy at Telus Digital, Judy Mellet. Welcome. Joining her and able to scale design-led problem solving in large enterprises in a single bound is Patrick Bach, Director of Service Design at CIBC. Thank you and welcome for joining us. Next, a true sovereign of strategy, a heroine of the human-centered. We have Andrea Guertin, the VP of Design Strategy at Bridgeable. Welcome. And last but not least, a real custodian of the customer experience with an uncanny ability to turn chaos into clarity. Uzair, Sukhera, the Senior Director of Product and Design right here at mobileLIVE. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, I want to remind everybody that if you have any questions for the panel, please use the Q&A or the chat and we'll do our best to get that answered. Now, I'm going to assume our audience is excited to get this started as I am. So, and seeing as they're not here to listen to me, let's get on to the first question. Now, service design as a practice and discipline is by no means new, but since the pandemic and the resulting mass migration to all things digital, have you noticed any changes in how service design is being practiced? And seeing how we have such diverse perspective on our panel, let's start with Patrick. I'd be curious about the changes you see from an internal perspective.
Maybe I think off with maybe two obvious perspectives. Ones that my team thinks a lot about. I think the first one is, of course, the elephant in the room a little bit is around research. You know, when we do service design, we often like to go out into the world. We want to observe. We want to interact with clients in the context that they are experiencing and using that service. And for a bank or for many services, there are a mix of digital and physical as well as phone experiences. So obviously the shift to digital has meant that those realities of going out into the world and easily being able to interact with people have had to change. And something as simple as conducting an ethnographic interview, which is something that my team primarily like to do in person. We would even fly across the country to go meet people in their homes and spend time with them, has had to go virtual. And with that came obviously a lot of changes. Certainly a lot of elements of that can translate well to, with Zoom and with video conferencing. I think there's a lot of ability to still get at the heart of the research questions, but there are also some experiences that become very difficult or impossible to navigate. So I think that the shift to virtual research, the shift, I would even say more so to virtual collaboration and co-creation. If you're a research team that's using more participatory, activity-based research, that's really tricky in a virtual environment because there is a huge barrier, which is usability. I had a hard time getting into this Zoom call, and I know how to use Zoom. I use it every day, and I still struggle. So when you're talking to participants with people of various degrees of ability, various degrees of tech literacy as well, it's not easy, and it creates all these new interesting and difficult questions around inclusivity of the research, around accessibility of what you're trying to do and whose voices are being heard. There's a huge bias we've seen in the shift to digital research, is that there's a sampling bias, right? There are a lot of people who are maybe not as comfortable or willing to do this kind of research. So we've been kind of reflecting a little bit on, should we go, like, kind of embracing the phone call. A phone call. Everyone can take a phone call, right? Everyone can have a conversation over the phone. That's certainly a more inclusive way to talk to someone than using a Zoom meeting. So I won't opine too much over virtual research, just to say that it has definitely thrown a wrench in the works. The other point I would say is around stakeholders. I think a lot of what we do as service designers is try to cross silos and bring various leaders and teams together to create a shared vision, to opine over problems together, to co-create, to debate, to discuss, and you lose a lot of that too in your in the shift to remote. Not only is the conversation not necessarily entirely organic, there are breaks and stops, tech issues, there are all kinds of myriad of problems that kind of get in the way from something that would have been a seamless experience of just having a few people in the room together. So one of the ways that we've adapted actually is around how we communicate. So it used to be that we would do these very physical walkthroughs. We would, print things out over large sheets of paper and get everyone to walk around and, annotate or reflect and things like that. And in the virtual world, we've actually been embracing a bit more of the format of the medium of video. So instead of creating like a journey map or a service blueprint that's kind of a physical artifact, we've been trying to convert those things into something that's more portable, repeatable, reusable, but that can be done in a consistent way. So we've been recording ourselves going over something, or using video in a variety of different ways to communicate a message in a repeatable way to a large number of people asynchronously, essentially, but doing that in a way where we can still facilitate some of those conversations. So maybe I'll pause there. I think for me, those have been definitely the two biggest challenges in adapting to the everyone's at home world.
Yeah, it's hard to conceive the amount of hurdles and things that you probably took for granted that you've had to overcome now that this massive migration to the virtual world. Judy, I'd be interested in from an external perspective. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, I agree with a lot of what Patrick said. I think the same fundamentals around the process are true and stay true. It's just what are some of the different ways you need to go about it, and not just assume that you can take whatever you're doing and then just lift and shift it into a virtual format. So let's take observational research, for example, where a customer, we are on a project where we're trying to observe what happens in an installation process in the home, where a customer might be comfortable in some ways letting you in to the house and observe them, and they see you as perhaps somebody that may be able to support them through that process. They are less wanting to be observed over video. And it's just a dynamic. They feel that feels like they're being watched, they're being hurried, and you're less, I guess, as an observer, have less utility in a video format. And so there's this very notion of, I don't like the video medium where I might have been comfortable if you were present in my home. So just having to adapt around that and say, okay, would you be comfortable videotaping yourself, and then having us be able to review the video and have an in-depth interview afterwards on some questions that we might have. So again, not just assuming because now we are virtual that we are just taking all of our practices and then moving into a virtual format, being really thoughtful around like what are some of the pain points that might arise, making those assumptions. And then I'd say, perhaps this is kind of teasing out some dialogue that's forthcoming, but I do find that the nature of the projects that are coming to us are much bigger and demanding in scope and more transformative. So instead of just saying, hey, can you look at this particular experience and let us know what are items that we might come up with to address these issues or address this business gap. When you have things like retail door-to-door services now no longer available, the need for transformation is much more pressing. So the types of requests that we're getting from our internal clients tend to be more transformational. Can you just rewrite the entire journey as opposed to look at the existing one and identify new areas for improvement.
It's just like kind of completely reimagining the whole concept and everything, the whole approach that you previously took towards it. Andrea, from an agency point of view, how has the practice of service design kind of changed pre-pandemic or post-pandemic?
Well, for us at Bridgeable, we use human-centered design to demystify complex systems and justify this kind of fact-finding to people who are in charge of these transformational projects like Judy's talking about. And Patrick's talking about these stakeholders. The good news is that they're all end users of complex and broken systems. And so trying to get the buy-in and tell the stories to justify the worth of understanding a systemic journey around these services, it's easier right now. Like Judy's saying, she's getting these bigger scale projects on her plate is because everyone's an end user right now in a broken system, and understanding from that pain point that they've experienced that this matters and it's important to get right. And so for us, that buy-in is actually much easier with everyone being a user of a digital experience that's broken in at least 3 times a day. Let's say that's like a modest estimation of that.
So needless to say, you've been quite busy lately.
Needless to say, yes, it's a good bad problem to have right now.
That's I couldn't agree with you more. Uzair, what have you noticed in the approach and how the practice of service design has kind of had to shift and augment itself in our current reality?
So I definitely echo the things Patrick went into in depth and Judy also built upon. I think definitely the context of the users has become much more difficult to understand because we are not in person. But again, I would like to focus on the things that we've learned going through this journey, which I think are going to stay with us for longer and are helping us in the practice of service design. And one of them is, at least in certain parts of the service design lifecycle, we have seen a lot of efficiency being brought in by the digital tools that now we are using. So Patrick was talking about like the physical walkthroughs. That used to be like the hallmark of a studio, having like the virtual artifacts that people would be walked through in terms of this is experience map, this is the people we are empathizing with, right? Now literally those walls exist in the Miro boards. And what I've seen is it has brought in new opportunities for the teams now, at least in terms of collating research, bringing it all together, laying it out. So the virtual wall probably had physical limitations in the offices in terms of how big the walls were and where they were located. The virtual walls are infinite, and it allows us to like really bring together, this is the literature survey, this is what one participant said, this is the pictures around them. So I think like these virtual tools have really helped us in certain ways be more efficient and bring in the artifacts and lay them out together for effective storytelling. So I think that's one definite advantage we have seen. In other ways, I think there's always been either we can do service design or facilitation in physical or digital. That used to be the way before, because there's too much overhead of doing things in physical and translating them into digital. Like literally early on in the career, I've been in those places we were digitizing every single sticky note. It took a lot of time. So I think, again, these things as we're learning, not that we did not used to do virtual collaboration workshops even before, but it's the default now. So I think, again, there are big efficiency wins there. I think other things are, again, a byproduct that since it's all digital, like Andrea was mentioning, everybody is now accessible to be part of that discussion. That has opened us to working across different projects, across different time zones. It was literally not possible before. Those projects may not have been even possible for us to work on because the users are like 2 time zones away. So there's a big overhead to go to the users, observe all those things. So I would say like these are the benefits. Again, the other things we have lost, I think other colleagues have talked about them. So I think I'll pause here.
Perfect. Patrick, what do you have to say on the issue? See you put your hand up.
No, normally this is where I would like casually inject my comment, but in virtual you can't do that. So we have I don't know if everyone does this, but we have this we use the hands up, honestly, to say, can I speak next? Yeah, I think Uzair nailed it. What you gain in what we've seen is you gain breadth. You get more people, you can accommodate across time zones. Having something virtual means it can be reused, it can be stored and distributed more easily. But the trade-off is, I find, is like the engagement, hearts and minds. There's only so much people can stare at a computer screen, and Miro is a fantastic tool, but like when you're zooming in and out and you're trying to follow people around, it's not as easy as just having someone in a room with you and telling a story and pointing at a thing on a wall. So I think you do gain a lot from this, but you also lose a lot as well, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was also going to say that it seems that while there are obviously a lot of limitations that have come up, it also seems that the potential for how far-reaching and how much input you can get thanks to digital for service design really has increased. Andrea?
I was just going to add that we catch ourselves a lot thinking about who has access to the internet, digital platforms, and technology to actually access us and for us to access them to get their voice as a part of these journeys. I think that that's something that we're trying to keep top of mind as practitioners with this research, because that is a massive swath of the population that in virtual research forums and methods and facilitation and workshops that we're leading, we're missing out on a lot of people being able to access that conversation. And we're trying to think of more creative ways to do that. And especially safely during the pandemic, it's kind of like a double layer around the access for people.
Do you have something you'd like to add? Something is there?
Just on Patrick's point, so it was just like to quote, I think Sundar Pichai, he said this in a very profound way. People were asking, like, are you looking for a remote future work? And he said, yeah, it would be hybrid, but hard problems are not easy to solve in virtual. So for that, we will come on site. So that's just going back to Patrick's point that it's incredibly harder to do facilitation using these online tools because of barriers. And also this, I cannot give you, Chris, the same feedback I would give you in person because there's kinesthetics, there are a lot of things that we achieve as human beings being physically looking at each other in terms of postures and other things. So it's definitely slowed down certain portions as well in terms of problem solving.
I have been getting a lot less feedback from you lately, Uzair. I didn't want to bring it up, but it's okay. Seemed like a good time now. Okay, this is wonderful. So actually, this is a pretty good segue to our next question. So I don't need to tell you that all of you that the scope of service design is incredibly far-reaching, and this point has only been reinforced by recent history. But what new type of initiatives are you seeing service design being applied to, or where are you seeing an increase in demand for this? We'll start with you, Andrea.
We like to play, a significant amount of our market is in healthcare and pharma, and it's something that is being felt by everyone right now. I don't think people have ever talked about the type of vaccine they're receiving until now. And that's the type of strategic foresight that we don't have when we're trying to predict the future around service design and what does that mean. And so for us, the conversation that we're having at a systemic level of who impacts the healthcare ecosystem for us is really interesting, because now any individual in our society has an opinion on how can that help them? How does that work? What kind of agency does someone have or should they have in that system? So for us, it's been a really interesting kind of unearthing into kind of the like societal discourse right now. So for us, it's at a new scale of awareness that we're really appreciating and seeing a lot.
So you'd say that more people are just starting to understand the value behind service design, kind of a bit more so now?
Yeah, because I think people are saying, oh, I want to be in line for the vaccine. Oh, but I'm potentially not in the first responder, so I'm not going to get the first wave. People are understanding where they are in a chain of events in this type of service to get that vaccine. I think that's an interesting level of individual engagement in service design that I don't know if we've had before, at least in healthcare from our perspective.
Uzair, what are your thoughts? What new initiatives do you see kind of coming to light, or areas that have like a significant increase in demand for service design? Or maybe if the demand's not there, maybe they do need it.
So I think my worldview is kind of biased in a way because we are dealing with digital technologies and digital experiences, working with telco partners and banks. So in my we have seen in the last year or so, initially it was about sense making, about facilitation. Well, how do we do this new thing in the new world? Like Judy was talking about. So a lot of internal requests also came our way. Hey, this has disrupted our entire sales and engagement process with the customers. How do we do this better in a new world? And over the time, as people settled in and they realized the impacts of this drastic change on their industry and their business, then the hard problems started coming in. Again, going back to what Judy was alluding to. So a few interesting I would like to bring here is a real effort that we were involved in was by an industry that used to be very much focused on in-person relationship-based selling. So that's real estate, for example. If you have to go physically visit the space to understand, get a look and feel. Nobody would imagine buying $1 million properties just not having the ability to see that in person. But because of this shift, although like again, all of them had virtual tools and virtual technologies for walkthrough, but it provided them with an opportunity to think and reset. Again, like Judy said, reinvent the whole journey. So they thought about, and the challenge we worked with them was, well, how do we translate all the physical interactions a broker has with a brokerage and with their customers in a virtual world? So how can we build an entirely different virtual campus where they go, they attend virtual trainings, they go to finance department, that's also like a virtual interaction, going to, now I'm a Zoom call and I teleport my customer into the property as if we are going a virtual walkthrough. So this was like something which nobody had imagined before. And it was incredibly hard to even deconstruct because the mental models in physical space do not directly translate into the virtual world. So you have to like rethink, well, I'm walking through to finance. Yes, this is how you used to do in office, but in virtual, if I'm walking, does it even make sense in a virtual campus? So interaction design, whole shebang. I think it was a really amazing journey working through that. I think another interesting one is now that the focus has shifted again towards internal focus towards organizations, and they're beginning to realize service design is something which can help them on their business goals and objectives. I think of it as a trend where service designing is being elevated within the organization. So an interesting problem space we came into is how might we improve our developers' experience in a large enterprise. So again, we took it as an opportunity to empathize with the developers, map out their entire journey from concept to pushing code out to market as a journey, treat what are the pain points, where do things break down, and how can we how can we facilitate their lives so they can do their best work, which is coding and not the other things they have to do to get to code. So again, I think I'll pause here and let others chime in.
Yeah, I'll pass it over to Patrick because I saw him nodding along in agreement along the way here.
Yeah, sure. I'm nodding away with all of you. Maybe I'll piggyback off of Uzair's your last point. I promise I don't know this by heart. I just looked it up. There's this really good quote from the Journal of Service Management. It was a piece of research that was done by 4 individuals, and I'll just read it really quickly. It says, "Service design is considered a multidisciplinary field. Its contributions often adapt a specific disciplinary stance, lacking a more complete and integrated approach." And I think that's a fancy way of just saying that I think what makes service design strong is its malleability, and it is not a dogmatic approach to solving problems. It is rather a combination of lots of different methodologies, but also its adaptability to environment, to circumstance, to needs, to problems. And I think that, you know, this is not a COVID thing, but necessarily, or even a last year thing, but I think some of my favorite projects that I've worked on as a service designer have been the ones that actually in many ways don't look and feel like a traditional service design project. I think when we think of these, we typically think of something with an end user involved, something around a buying journey or some kind of, you know, with an end goal of usually acquiring something. And I think some of the more interesting projects that my team is supporting right now is we're working, for example, with an escalation team within the bank, and our end user on this project is the actual caseworker, the account management person. So if you ever get really upset at your bank and you send them a very angry letter or email the CEO, these complaints all go to a client account management team, which deals with really highest order escalations. And our service design project is around their experience of receiving cases, diagnosing cases. How do they communicate with each other? How is information shared and stored within this team? How do we create positive outcomes, certainly for the end user, the client who wants to resolve the issue, but how do we create processes and tools for the actual case managers and the teams as well? So really reflecting on your experience with developers, Uzair, I think that's one of my favorite things about service design is you can apply it to a lot of different projects and a lot of different circumstances. And I think that I've had more fun and I've grown and learned the most when we've been pushing ourselves and pushing our approach to adapt to these new and different environments. And you need different types of research, different types of design, different types of solutioning, different types of ways of working when you adapt to these different kinds of problems. And I think that that's probably the single greatest thing about, I think when service design is done well, is that adaptability and that malleability.
I'm just very impressed with that answer. I'm going to pass it over to Judy now. What do you think, Judy? I know you mentioned earlier about you've noticed a lot of just more large scale initiatives, just with really broad scopes. What really particularly stands out to you, though?
Yeah, and maybe just to spin back around to where Andrea started, I know a lot of folks associate, when they think about Telus, the ducks and bunnies and the flowers, but we actually have significant interest in a number of other industries, notably health. If anyone had been following the news, we just spun off a large call center as its own entity and company, then got listed on the stock exchange. And we've started to invest in areas like agri-tech and so on. So health is one of the biggest areas in which we play a role, stitching together really complex stakeholders such as government, care providers, hospitals, insurance companies, data, which we have storage capabilities. So when we have traditionally in a business, very rarely do you have kind of the rug taken out from under you, right? You can see trends and you're looking at data. If you're managing your business really well, you can see things that are happening. We're seeing slippage here or subscribers, their loading go down. When we're in a situation such as we were kind of imposed to COVID, you have like large scale disruptions happening. So there's a couple things. One, we have the holy crap types of projects, right? Like, what do we do right now? You can't have technicians going into to homes to install your TV and internet services. Like, okay, like call in service designers to help kind of stitch together what that experience is. But it also gives rise to new innovations, right? So I think we all know that when you're in crisis, it forces people into having to innovate where you might not necessarily have done when you have the comfort of all your resources and the stability of kind of knowing what's happening. So health would be one area. We're just starting to get engaged in the long-term care home issues that are being faced here with a client, a government client, and not just in the connectivity space, right? And you think about what's happening. I think everyone knows the long-term care crisis that's happening. Not only are residents separated from being able to see their family and friends and loved ones, they themselves can't even congregate in common spaces. And it really brings and highlights the isolation issue. So there's a connectivity piece, obviously, where Telus can play a big part. But also, if you're going to set up those underlying systems and structures and enablement pieces, like, does it give rise to new healthcare models, right? Can you use those same fundamental technology that you've enabled in to be able to deliver virtual care, to be able to provide social aspects? So we're weaving in together things such as not just the health side of the business, but we also have a big TV and content business. So what does it look like in a world where we might be able to deliver concert services virtually, like those are education, for example. And so that's really kind of more large scale innovations that we're being asked to look into because of what's arisen. So again, like a lot of businesses are obviously trying to struggle on how do we get back up to a place where we were pre-COVID, but also looking at this and saying, okay, is there a way to think differently and give rise to new business models or new ideas and new sources of inspiration? Right?
Kind of as a bit of a piggyback off of that, and I think it's another good segue, is even pre-pandemic, we saw, there was an undeniable shift in migration towards digital. However, as a result of the pandemic, that was rapidly accelerated. What are some of the noticeable changes that we've seen or you've noticed with, be it employee, customer? Because I know Patrick talked about some of the internal things that service design can do. So what has changed when it comes to customer or employee behavior and expectation that particularly stands out to you that you think service design might be apt to meet?
So I'll start from the consumer side. On the consumer side, initially, what we saw was a lot of empathy, even on the employer-employee relationship side. Everybody was trying to really give people a chance. They were willing to wait out because they understand that services and businesses are trying their best to serve them, and there's a lot more things they have to do, even in grocery shopping, for example, standing in lines, calling a contact center at Rogers, Telus, or bank, for example, and staying in line for an hour or so. So it was quite forgiving, but I think over time it's waning off, and we are getting back to our default modes and trying to have this expectation with these enterprise and businesses to get their act together and be ready to kind of serve them. So I think that's one trend we are definitely seeing. Another one is, again, staying lonely and staying virtual for a really long time. There's a big craving now to actually get back to the physical interactions and the human-to-human connection we had. So like Judy was saying, it's again re-architecting those services, and Patrick is talking about caseworkers. So well, yes, this digital is probably working many pieces, but it's not the same as we used to interact with human beings and the care we used to receive in store. For example, if you go and buy a SIM or to a bank branch, how do we bring those behaviors into this cold, hard, mechanical, digital world? So I think these are challenges that we have to continue looking after, humanizing our services. I think when we talked earlier before, I remember Patrick was mentioning like some of these interventions that have gone through after pandemic have been like patches, just roll this out and get the service going live. However broken is it, however non-empathetic it is, it's just about restoring service, about restoring sales channels. So I think now as we are seeing, there has to be a lot more focus to reorganizing, redesigning these services so they're more human-centered. I'll stop there and see what others have to add on that.
Patrick, we'll pass it over to you.
Here's my hot take. You can take this to the bank and you can remind me that if I'm wrong. 10 years ago, however many years ago, there was an arms race to building digital. Every company decided that they needed a digital team and to rethink their digital channels, and everyone bet the farm that the world was going digital. Everything would be digital only or predominantly digital. I think what everyone slowly realizes is that, whoops, human action matters. People actually, turns out they actually want to talk to someone, not a robot. Oh, and then in fact, digital is an enabler and certainly an important channel, but it needs to play nice with other channels, and the experience needs to be thought of as a holistic one, not a digital experience. Then the pandemic came. It's like we all forgot that lesson. Now we're back into this world, I think, where we believe that digital has certainly accelerated significantly, and digital has become the dominant channel. But we can't forget that there are very strong, very unusual, very potentially temporary changes that are driving this change in behavior, that are driving this. So I think it's just, I'm seeing this kind of it feels like we've gone in the past and we've forgotten the lessons of the most recent years of that yes, digital is good. Digital will continue to be important, and digital should obviously be something that every company, every experience needs to design for. But this kind of naivete that that physical experiences, that human connection, whether in person or on a conversation, are not some integral part of the experience, and potentially even the most integral part of the experience, depending on what you're talking about, is naive, in my opinion. And I think that, to Uzair's point, once things come back to normal, and I'm not saying in a week or two, I'm saying in a year or two maybe, best believe that people will I think will crave that in a way that they have not maybe craved it in recent years. So I think that, yeah, I think if you're smart, you're not you're not losing sight of that holistic experience, and you're not necessarily putting too many eggs in that digital basket, and you're thinking about it. You're still thinking about it holistically. I think the other thing I would just like to say, and I think we talked about this in our pre-meeting, was that this behavior change is being exacerbated and being motivated by sort of circumstances that are absurd, right? These are like world-changing circumstances. So I think it's important to remind ourselves of that, and that a lot of these behaviors are not necessarily permanent. Things may change again. So just being prepared for that change, however it comes and to what degree it comes, I think is really important. Great.
Andrea?
I'm actually going to piggyback on Patrick's hot take a little bit, where it's, I in a way, I kind of want to answer, I believe it's Danish has submitted a question around the role of trusted intermediaries in virtual world. And I think, well, it kind of plays into the consumer behaviors. We're losing sight that some people have a layer between the digital channel as a facilitator to their access and someone who's actually still either advocating for them or showing them that that's a potential channel. When we're talking about long-term care homes, we have to think about individuals who don't have access in our service journey that we're articulating. Who's that kind of secondary access point? And are we thinking about them in that space? I think that we have a responsibility as service designers to make sure that we're mapping out layers of touch points for whatever service journey we're thinking about, if we're thinking about it as a digital channel for people.
That's a great point. Judy, yourself?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think about if there's something I mean, I don't know. It's not a disagreement with Patrick. I don't think any of us know what a post-COVID environment looks like. It would be interesting to understand what behaviors stick and start to plan out like the way that businesses and the experiences and the services get delivered, based on things that again will become permanent. And I say, for example, like we're now all doing the online shopping and getting the Amazon deliveries coming regularly, and what it's really made me realize is like the things I don't particularly enjoy going out and shopping for, like the toilet papers or the things that are heavy and the paper towels and replenishment. I don't think I will go back to a model where I'm going physically in to buy those things. And the things that I am going out for, I truly want to go out and enjoy the experiential, physical, in person. So again, thinking about that, what that means to your business, and what are those things that have become more permanent, like attitudes and formulating behaviors that businesses need to account for, right? Not just assuming we'll edge back into the way of the world. And same thing for work, right? Like now that, like, would I like to be in the office and physically interacting with my colleagues? 100%. Do I want to be doing that in a 5-day-a-week workday? No. I quite enjoy the flexibility around having a hybrid of at home and in person when you need to be. Again, what are those critical meetings or interactions that require an in-person or meeting setting? And I think what this has taught us is a lot of it can be done virtually, even business travel. I don't anticipate that business travel will go back to the volumes or be quite like the way, because what this has taught us is we can very effectively navigate and save a whole lot of business expenses, what would normally have been like business travel, right? Getting on the airplane, going through airport security, like why, right? So again, what are the critical meetings? So even within businesses, and then when you think about a B2C or B2B, what's going to stick and what's going to go like recede back to the way it was.
Yeah, I think that is also like the really big question, is how to determine what is permanent, what is temporary, and how to plan accordingly. Patrick, what do you have to say on this issue?
No, I was just going to agree with Judy. I think you said it quickly. Some things will stay, but some things will stick. Other things will change. Some of them will go back. And I think new behaviors will also emerge out of this potential post-pandemic world. I think new experiences, new desires, new needs will emerge as well. So this is I know designers are famous for it depends an answer to a question, but I really think it depends. And I think if you're a business leader, if you're a product owner, if you're a service designer, I think the best thing you can be doing now is not taking any of these assumptions to the bank, but stay really close to your customers, stay close to them, engage with them, and see how these sort of changes start to emerge and where sort of weak signals begin to emerge and them, because I don't think anyone knows the answer. Acts like they know the answer to what a year from now or 2 years from now will look like is lying to themselves and lying to everyone around them. So I think that stay close to your customers, stay close to your channels, and track those behaviors, and be adaptive, be ready for the scenario. I think we talked about scenario planning a lot as being something that not enough maybe businesses or not enough teams are engaging in, but now is the time. There ever was a time to plan for multiple scenarios. Now is that time, because no one knows where this will go, and your ability to adapt to scenario A, B versus C may make the difference between you and who gets there first, or who adapts to that new reality.
I think that is probably a critical message I'd like to leave, is we as practitioners, if you are working on reconfiguring journeys or throwing out the old ones and saying, okay, how do we think about this in a born digital first world, that flexibility, or we're equipping our internal clients with the means to be able to then evolve those with the changing context. What we don't want to be is the obsolete service designers that came in and hardwired it to the current circumstance, nor do we want to be continually tethered, have to come back and redo precious work that we've already done. So how can, perhaps through scenario planning, but again, maybe in a coaching-like model, enable or equip your stakeholders with the capabilities to be able to, one, identify changing circumstances. What are those signals or signposts? And then secondly, how can they help themselves and be able to revise the journeys or work that you've done to go along with the changing circumstances?
All in all, it sounds like you guys are all going to be incredibly busy in the very near future. Uzair, you've got something to add, my friend.
So I second Judy and Patrick's points. I think what I want to leave with people though is the entire life cycle of this whole process of human-centered design. We come in as service designers at the start, we reinvent, re-engage, we work with the business and also our development teams to imagine what the experiences would look like. What I'm seeing increasingly, which worries me, is the context of the customer doesn't get translated throughout the whole supply chain. We start off by marketing noise, knowing the demographics and the target audience really well, to service designers mapping out personas, going to developers, as a user, I need to do this, and going to testers down in the software development. No empathy is passed on to that supply chain. So I think it's also what I would want to leave with people is, as service design teams, we also need to do a bit better to augment ourselves from the front load piece to all the way to the experience creation rollout, so that we can pass on the empathy and context, and we can realize the experiences as they were imagined to be human-centered.
Is that saying like the weakest, I don't know, I'm going to break it, bastardize it, but it's like what is the weakest link in the chain, something like that, right? The weakest link is what makes the chain the weakest. Or you're all looking at me like you know exactly what I'm trying to say.
We got it, Patrick. Keep going.
You're helping me out here, okay? Whatever that's saying, I think like maybe this is a silly thing, but I think like the least human-centered part of your process is as human-centered as you are as a team. So I think if you have these downstream processes or teams or people who are so disconnected or not necessarily, to your point, Uzair, who don't fully understand the context of who or what we're trying to do, and that's not to blame anyone. It's not to say it's not a moral judgment. It's just that we haven't designed the process, or the organization hasn't designed a process which is sort of end-to-end human-centered. Then you are only as human-centered as like your least human-centered piece of that puzzle, I think.
I think that individuals can have. Oh, sorry, Judy.
No, I don't know where we're going the same place, Andrea. I'll just start and then maybe it.
Yeah, of course.
Maybe that was a few years ago, and I'm showing my age and tenure in this game, but I'm finding less having to explain why we have to take the customer-centric standpoint. Like I'm not having to make that pitch quite anymore. Now it's about like enabling the decision making around which nodes or areas like make the most sense, right? Like there's this intersection of we have to do what's right by the customer, and then again, what's going to drive the biggest business impact. So I find there's more of the work that we're doing centered around those types of questions, as opposed to why do we need your team to take a human-centered approach. And I don't know, Andrea, if we were going in the same place.
I can yes and your point. Like I'm thinking that if you own a product team, or if you're a leader within a service design team, you have some ownership on how you pass off the work that you do, to make sure that it's not just like a baton. You're not just like giving it and hoping for the best later on. So we sometimes see product dev teams receiving personas and then just trying to articulate those. I think that when people realize that you might be human-centered in the way that your team is conducting its work, but the pass off is less human-centered, that might be a really good opportunity to think about how could you actually break down that transition or the communication across teams, because that is a very simple way for everyone to have a little bit of agency in making sure that those like the end-to-end of that system or that channel within your organization that's doing that. I think that people can really be honest with themselves if it's just like a PowerPoint deck and you say like, good luck, make sure you follow everything that we're recommending. I think there's an interesting push and pull there that we can all kind of be honest about.
That's a great point. So sorry, I was trying to wrap my head around that. No, I won't even try.
I just mean talk to the other teams. How about that? If that's the easiest way to say it.
Yeah, no. So essentially, if you're trying to say create human-centered experiences, but your teams are in silos, that empathy is not going to transcend across those silos to create that experience, correct?
I think that there are things that you can do to make sure that it translates effectively, and most importantly, yes.
Okay.
I think, Andrea, yours might be more just reflecting the external versus internal perspective. And because we work so closely with Bridgeable, the major difference, and it's actually even a difference around the orientation of, we originally sat within the product development function, and then in the last year moved over in digital. The work, and we're going much further into the life cycle stages of our work. And I don't even know if we're purists here, whether or not you can say it's neatly service design. We have analysts on our team doing data analytics. We have process engineers that are breaking the processes down. So it's a little bit of this Frankenstein where there's a human-centered component that drives everything, but you're stitching together a lot of these other specialties. In any case, the place where we need to take it to, before we would take the concept through prototype and then hand it off to a product owner, who then had much more latitude around whether or not they took something forward. And we know that there's humans in the business too, that maybe they picked the things that they wanted, or they felt that it it landed with the hypothesis or assumption they already had. But in any case, it rested the decision around what to carry forward sat a lot with the product team. Within digital, the place we're having to carry it through is we will take it through not just prototyping, we'll take it to pilot. So we'll do the business case and say, here are the KPIs or metrics we think we're going to hit. We'll do the large scale pilot, like sometimes it's smaller and then bigger, to something where you can actually say, okay, the business case proves out. And then we're passing it off to development to scale. And so when we're talking about carrying through empathy, yes, we need to do that, but we have a lot more of participation in the latter stages of the development life cycle to ensure like those stay on and persist. And so that's the primary thing, even from changing where our organization, like where we sit organizationally. So again, do I say like the silos don't call me a liar right away, but I'm finding that because we're staying much longer and we're engaged much earlier, that the consistency of that is enabling a lot more of what we're doing, and then the human voice and the empathy and the people behind the solutions to carry through.
It seems like I didn't want to interrupt the conversation since it was going so well, but we didn't really have too much time to cover any Q&A, although Andrea was kind enough to tackle Donish's question throughout. We've got one that kind of came in through the chat, and I've got another one that came in via email. So we'll see if we can get to these before the end. First up, we'll do the email. Talked a lot today about service design and what it can do and where it is going, but could one of you comment on the impact or on where the impact of service design ends? What is its limitations, if any?
I volunteer Patrick. Don't you have an, didn't we discuss this in the dry run or no? That it obviously has limitations.
No, I think it's perfect. I think it solves all problems and everyone should do it. I mean, I have a bit of a non-answer in that I think the malleability of service design, as I said earlier, is its greatest strength, in that I think if you really wanted to, you could probably contort it or change it or adapt it to I'd say most problem solving. If you have a problem and people are involved in that problem, I genuinely believe that you can apply service design in a meaningful way. Now, does it have to be the same way every time? Absolutely not. Depending on the type of problem, the context, the environment, all of these things, you likely can make a lot of changes. Oh, sorry, Chris, were you on mute talking? Or?
No. It's please go ahead.
Oh. Okay. So I saw your mouth moving. Anyways. Yeah. So I genuinely believe that you can apply, if there are people involved and you're trying to solve a problem, or you're trying to change a behavior, or you are trying to drive some kind of an outcome, I genuinely think that you can apply some version of service design to that. I think it largely comes down to like how dogmatic are you being? I don't think if service design to you or to your company is one way of doing things all the time, then I think there are far more limitations than if it's about a set of values and principles that can be applied to a lot of different problems. Then I think you open up the breadth of types of engagements and types of projects that you can with or engage with. And sometimes our role is to own the whole thing. We drive the project, we drive the transformation, and we drive the implementation on my team. And other times we're playing more of a piece in a larger machinery, right? There's a huge project and we're coming in and doing just one aspect of it, one touch point, or we're doing maybe some design or some research in one area. So I think, if you're willing to also like modularize your approach to service design, and it's not always all or nothing, then I think, again, you open up the possibilities of it being relevant in the environment you're operating in.
It's a really good answer. And I apologize for my mouth moving. I had to grab my laptop charger because my battery thing lied to me. I thought I had more time than I did. I didn't want to lose y'all. I hate to be the bearer of bad news and hopefully never of bad experiences, but we seem to be out of time here today. I wanted to give a special thanks to all of our heroes, and they obviously very much are so. Andrea, Patrick, Judy, and Uzair, thank you so very much for taking the time to speak with us today. Of course, I wanted to thank all of you for joining us. Keep an eye on your inbox for a full recording of today's discussion, as well as some updates on our latest events. We do have some fun ones on the way. I hope you all enjoyed yourself, and until next time, keep safe and have a good day.